We have got ourselves a 13-game main slate tonight, gentlemen. It's very good to see you. We're going to begin a little MLB batting practice. And first off, Garion, let's start with you here. Best DFS sportsbook plays for tonight's slate across the way, obviously, is our main focus. So which pitcher has your favorite matchup tonight for DFS? Is it one of the two very chalky New Yorkers?
Well, that's the thing that I think we have to talk about is it would be in a vacuum, although it seems like both of these games are going to get rained out. I think that Gerrit Cole would be the guy tonight, considering one, you never see Gerrit Cole below 10K, and two, he hasn't given up an earned run in his last two starts, and there is no team in baseball worse against right-handed pitching statistically than the Texas Rangers. But I don't think this game gets played. So you're going to have to keep an eye on both the Mets game and the Yankees game, obviously, but I'm kind of writing them off in my head already. And that would then lead me on a matchup basis anyway to probably take a serious look at Nathan Eovaldi. He's been not the problem so far this season for the Red Sox. He's been quite good. Has had some issues with the home run ball, but that's really it. Where the White Sox have just been decimated by injuries yet again. They put Andrew Vaughn on the IL. Yesterday, they're obviously without Eloy Jimenez right now. They've been terrible too against right-handed pitchers. Just a 74 WRC plus so far this season within that split. So I think Eovaldi's in a really nice spot tonight. Again, if you do have to pivot away from the New York guys because they're underwater.
All right. Well, Rotowire's Mr. Halterman. Suppose you do get a rain out for one of those New York guys. You want to go to Eovaldi, like Garion mentioned. There are other guys who are expect to be owned in, say, 15, 18% plus of lineups, whether that's a Shane Bieber, a Yu Darvish. Who stands out?
Yeah, I do like paying all the way up for Kevin Gausman at 10,000, although he is a rain risk. It seems like, as of this morning, less rain risk there than on the East Coast, but still at least a moderate amount. So you want to check that. But if he is in the lineup, we're talking about a guy who has 41 strikeouts against 0 walks to start the season. Last I checked, that was pretty good. That'll lead to a 2.27 ERA. That is considered a underachievement by over a run and a half, according to FIP, which of course is depends heavily on strikeouts and walks. He's got a FIP of 0.51, which is quite good, I would say, if he can keep that up. We saw Corbin Burns with a similarly dominant start, I think, last year, where his FIP was just off the charts in a similar direction. So striking out over a third of opposing batters while walking none, you're not going to get much better than that. He is facing a Cleveland team that's gotten off to a very hot start at the plate, although I think if you look at the overall talent there, it's not a lineup that you'd expect to be quite where it is going forward. So I think given how hot Gausman's been, as long as the game goes forward, he's the high-priced ace that I'm most attracted to.
Let's stay with you, Erik, then. If we're looking for an infielder who's a must roster tonight across this slate, and again, with 26 teams playing on that slate, you got a lot of options. I could look to my bias, which isn't even far-fetched this time around. Rafael Devers, really good spot. Someone like Jose Altuve, really good spot. Who do you like?
The guy I like the most, I think, is Jared Walsh at 3,700. It's a nice mid-priced option that should let you fit in some of those more expensive guys. Walsh hasn't quite duplicated his numbers from last year when he hit 277 with 29 homers. He's hitting just 247 this year, although, again, considering the offensive environment is down, we have to mentally adjust all these mediocre seeming performances up a bit. 247 with 4 homers so far this year. He's actually cut his strikeout rate by 2 points to 24%. His barrel rate is down, but by less than a percentage point. So I think it's more or less the same Jared Walsh, who I think would have been going for more than 4,000 in the past, especially against Yoan Adon, who I'm not entirely sure why he's in the Nationals rotation. Didn't necessarily have a lot of upper minors experience, and he looks like it so far. A 7.33 ERA this season, striking out under 19% of opposing batters, walking almost 12%. So it's a good matchup and a great price for a guy who I think should be a very solid hitter going forward.
What do you say, Garion?
Yeah, I'm looking in the exact same spot. And obviously Walsh is the much more economical way to attack this. But the nice thing about everyone's favorite first baseman in DFS that never plays first base, Shohei Ohtani, also has outfield eligibility. So you can get him and Jared Walsh into the same lineup. And you want to do that against a Don who has just not been able to get out left-handed batters so far this season. It pains me to say this. This is a man who almost got the Jays into the playoffs last year in game 162, but he's looked terrible so far this season. He has the highest expected WOBA of any pitcher who's faced at least 100 batters so far this season at 444. Left-handed batters in particular have a 313 batting average and a 414 WOBA against him across his 5 starts. He's been particularly bad when facing anyone not named the Arizona Diamondbacks, which is understandable. That was his only quality outing of the season. I just think you should load up on the Angels tonight. And if you can do so with specifically the left-handed hitters, like an Ohtani, like a Walsh, that's probably the best direction to go.
Gary, and if we're looking for an outfielder who could put up big fantasy numbers tonight, obviously you have a ton to choose from. I'm looking here at some guys that are in good spots. Byron Buxton's, high on that list. You could look at Cedric Mullins. Dalton Varsho is going to be incredibly popular. Aaron Judge, obviously. Who do you like?
I'm going to go with Kyle Tucker, who is now entering, I believe, like month 7 or 8 of his eternal struggle with expected WOBA versus actual statistics. Kyle Tucker is just one of the best hitters in baseball. So he is underpriced virtually on every slate. He's just $4,400 tonight. He's never doing as well as his advanced numbers say he's going to do, which has only been worse in 2022 when everyone's actual numbers are worse than their expected numbers because the baseball is dead. But he's got a 425 expected WOBA. That's elite. And his last 13 games, he's really starting to come around. In that 13 game span, a 221 WRC plus. He's hitting above 400. The balls are just finally finding some grass, which has been really nice for Kyle Tucker. And we've got Bo Brisky making his 3rd career start for the Tigers tonight. He's pitched 10 innings, given up 5 barrels, walked 4 guys, and given up 3 home runs. He's just not a guy who should be pitching at the major league level right now. So I think the Astros in general are in a really nice spot, but an opposite hand matchup like this for Tucker is one that you should really take advantage of.
Garen, I know in baseball, there are so many stats and metrics that we can track. Is that how it goes? Is it great, good, average, bad, eternal struggle?
Yeah.
Do we find that on the list?
Yeah.
What do you say here, Erik?
As far as eternal struggle, or as far as
you could focus on outfielders who are going to put up big nights, but if you want to weigh in on eternal struggle, I won't stop you.
I think poetry segment comes later, so we'll move to outfield here.
It's part of our potpourri.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go Juan Soto at 5,000. Whenever I can talk about Juan Soto, I'm a happy guy. So let's do that today. He's the 12th most expensive outfielder on this slate at 5,000, cheaper than the likes of Taylor Ward and Connor Joe, who are having great seasons, but they're also not named Juan Soto. The fear with Juan Soto for fantasy purposes is that he might just get walked every time he comes to the plate. Although he has started heating up in terms of, doing the things that you care even more about for fantasy purposes. He's got 3 homers in his last 6 games. And he'll have the platoon advantage here against Jaime Barria, who doesn't walk guys for his career, just 7.7% walk rate this year, just 2.1%. So if he comes into the zone, which he has been doing this year, Soto is as capable as anybody at crushing it. He's still doing his same Juan Soto thing where he's walking more than he strikes out, but he's making good contact as well, hitting 271, although his expected batting average, according to StatCast, is all the way up at 298. He's the same Juan Soto that we see pretty much every year, it seems like, and he's got a good matchup here. So if I can get him for less than I can get some of this year's hot starts, he's definitely somebody I'm interested in.
Erik, if we're looking for the best value option available tonight, is there a better option than KC outfielder Edward Olivares? Do you like someone better than him?
Well, I do like Kansas City here against Jordan Lyles. I think that's the kind of matchup we should be going for. But I'm looking at MJ Melendez at 2,200 if he plays. He's the young catching prospect who's come up, just played 2 games, but he's supposed to have an excellent bat. We're not sure exactly how often he's going to be in the lineup, given that Salvador Perez is there, although both of them are probably bat first kind of guys, so expect plenty of DH for both of them. He's a guy who's supposed to have a ton of raw power. Last year at the AAA level, hit 293, 413, 620 in 44 games with 13 homers. Really broke out a AA as well, 28 homers in 79 games. Wasn't actually doing well at the AAA level this season, but the team decided they needed him. if he's in the lineup, I think he's a lot better than 2,200 at the catcher position.
Garion, who's your value?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a cop-out, but I'm just going to go with Royce Lewis, who we've already been told will be in the lineup tonight. Before we came on air, we saw that Carlos Correa was placed on the injured list. The Twins need this guy right now. And because he is making his MLB debut, as is often the case, he is just $2,000. He's the bare minimum on DraftKings tonight. Former number 1 overall pick in 2017, was really hitting the baseball well in AAA. This season, over 100 plate appearances, a 164 WRC plus. It's hard to say exactly where he's going to end up in the Twins lineup, but considering the amount of injuries they have right now, I feel like he's going to be in at least the top 2/3. Maybe, I mean, if not even just taking over like the number 2 spot for Correa. So, obviously wait and see where he ends up in that Twins lineup, and that can kind of dictate how much exposure you're getting to a guy like Royce Lewis, but $2,000 for someone with his offensive potential in a matchup against Zach Logue as well, who is, I mean, literally a AAA level pitcher. He's getting the call up tonight because the Athletics just need someone. I think it's a really nice spot.
Garion, it's time for a Slate approved pick. So with that, your absolute favorite bet on the DK Sportsbook.
So this one's tough. I agree with Erik. I think that Kevin Gausman is probably having the best season of any pitcher so far in baseball, but at the same time, I'm drawn towards the Guardians at plus 125 as a home underdog. I think this is basically a toss-up game. I know Shane Bieber has lost a couple ticks on the old fastball velocity, but he's still been highly effective so far this season. He's got an ERA under 3 and a FIP just slightly above 3. He's not been bad. He's given up some barrels, but honestly, at this point, barrels don't quite mean the same thing they meant last season. So if I'm looking at this matchup, I would lean pitching-wise towards Toronto. But the Jays lineup has been underwhelming so far this season, especially the last couple of weeks. Maybe they get Teoscar Hernandez back tonight. That's still unclear. But the Guardians, I would also agree with Erik's assessment of the Guardians that they are not this type of lineup. But if you just want to go by the raw statistics, they are first in batting average, first in WOBA, and first in WRC plus against right-handed pitching so far this season. I'm just intrigued by that combination with Shane Bieber as an underdog at home. I think it all kind of stacks together to make me want to sprinkle there.
Erik, what do you got?
I'm looking at the Diamondbacks at home over the Rockies. Minus 145 isn't a great deal, but I think it's good enough, especially because the Rockies offense on the road is really a matchup that you want to pick on. The ball just moves differently at elevation versus outside of Coors Field. And especially for the first game of a road trip like we have here, you want to pick on these Rockies hitters when they maybe are, just their timing's off a tiny bit on those breaking balls. Also, the Diamondbacks will get Meryl Kelly, who I think has been one of the more interesting stories of the season so far. Added a bit of velocity, although it did come down a tiny bit, I think, in his last start. But he's been up there overall and has a 1.27 ERA on the season with a 2.11 FIP. His strikeout rate is up close to league average, and he's still not walking guys and has a pretty decent ground ball rate. This is a guy who was about as bland as it gets prior to this season. To see him take the next step at this age is going to be an interesting thing to follow, how well he can keep that up. Chad Kuhl on the other side actually has a 1.90 ERA himself, although his peripherals across the board are a tick or two worse than Kelly's. So I think the Diamondbacks have the advantage both on the mound and in the lineup, even though it's not much of a lineup there. But I still think, given that first game of the road trip for the Rockies, minus 145 is good enough to make this interesting.